There's a question that Foundations poses that must be answered. Are elves good in Standard? Over the last few years, elves have been around in Standard, and frankly, there haven't been enough payoffs to merit you going into a dedicated elf deck. Instead, the general philosophy and the general consensus seems to be, no matter what deck you're using, if you're going to be going into like a creature-based aggro deck, you're better served just grabbing the best cards and the strongest threats at whatever point in the curve, and dedicating to a creature type tends to be more of a liability these days than a benefit. Well, Foundations may just be changing that, or at least that's what we're going to try to find out today. There are a number of cards from Foundations that care about creature types, specifically elves. We do have the Elvish Archdruid, which is a classic elf card from back in the day. It's one of those go-tos. It gives all your other elves +1/+1, and it can tap to add mana for each elf you control. So as you can imagine, this can ramp you from 3 mana up to frickin' 9, like in a heartbeat. It's kind of amazing. We also have Dwynen's Elite, which is just all about putting elves on the board if you have other elves. So it definitely needs to be surrounded by elves to be good, but if it is, it's going to help supercharge and just put bodies online to benefit from all the other elf stuff. Funnily enough, Leaf Crown Visionary has been a card in Standard for the last 2 years because it was in Dominaria United, and it has not had any support, but now it does. From Lost Caverns of Ixalan, there's also Cavern of Souls, which is great for creature type-based strategies. So in this deck, we're rocking 4 of it, no problem. We also have the Banner of Kinship. This is a 2-of in this deck, and I have experimented with a number of different elf builds that either included it or didn't include it. And with a little bit of encouragement from some members of my community, shout out Foozy, I've decided to keep it in this deck because the main benefit of this elf deck is in its ability to win more. In 2024, power levels and speed of decks is just so high, and there are so much life gain, and there's so much just power flying around. We need to be able to push through so much damage consistently that a couple of blockers here and there, even if they have lifelink through like Sheltered by Ghost or a Reanimated Atraxa, whatever the case is, we need to be able to push more damage through than you think you have to. That's the conclusion that I've come to. And to that end, we also have Tyvar the Pummeler. This is probably the strongest card in the entire deck. It is a 3/3 for 3 where you can tap another creature to give it indestructible so it can protect itself, but its base ability, or its activated ability of 3 green, creatures you control get +X/+X till end of turn, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control, is excellent. Genuinely excellent. And I have found in games where I'm able to get that going, I will win when I otherwise wouldn't. This allows you to win races. It allows those 2/2s and 3/3s that are going to be punching through all of a sudden to become 8/8s and 10/10s. And all of a sudden, your opponent is very much in a rough way with this. It also gives us a way to use all that mana that Elvish Archdruid is generating in a way that will actually help convert to a win. It would be easy to put other mana sinks in here just for the sake of having them, but they're dead cards if we don't, have the Archdruid down to sink the mana in. Whereas Tyvar is just a good body on top of all the other things that he's doing. So even if we don't have enough mana to reasonably trigger this thing, that's okay. Also, if we can trigger it multiple times, or if we can activate it, rather, multiple times, the abilities stack on top of each other because the first buff applies, it increases that power. And then the second buff will see that power increase and apply that as well. So, if the biggest creature we have happens to be Tyvar at a 3/3, or let's say the Archdruid's here, it'll be a 4/4. Then all of a sudden we activate it, all of our creatures get +4/+4. Well, now our biggest creature's an 8/8 all of a sudden. So if we can tap the Archdruid for 5, trigger it again, everything gets +8/+8. That is a significant power increase. And if your opponent isn't able to block every single thing we have, that will oftentimes be enough to win, even in the face of, lifelinking blockers, like I'm saying. So that's really valuable, really important. A couple of other elves at the low end of the curve that we're rocking here in order to just flesh out and make sure we have bodies on board to take advantage of all this good stuff. We have the Llanowar Stalker, which is a 1/1 for 1. And whenever another creature enters, you get +1/+0. It'll allow us to apply some early chip damage. If you follow, if you have a Llanowar Stalker on turn 1 with a Dwynen's Elite on turn 2, all of a sudden you're punching for 3, and when your lords show up later, good things happen. So it's a way for some early aggression to be applied, and it just is an elf body that can take advantage of all of our other payoffs. Citanul Stalwart is also doing a Llanowar Elves impression in this deck. It is not as good, obviously, but it's fine. It'll get us where we got to go. Having multiple 1-drops in this deck also gives us a nice little boost if we're able to get the Llanowar Elves on turn 1. Because if we get a Llanowar Elf on turn 1 and then we play a turn 2, like 2-drops, say a Leafcrown Visionary or a Dwynen's Elite, having another 1-drop that we can use that mana on to establish yet another body on the board is going to give us a lot more power in those very early turns, which we are going to need. Because you'll notice this deck is going to be very, very, very soft to Sunfall. There's no question about it. It is what it is. We don't have a lot of card draw. We don't have a good way to rebuild. So that is a concern. If we're going up against a Sunfall deck, our best bet and our best hope is to kill them before they get there. And if we don't, there's a really good chance that in best of 1, we're going to lose those games. You'll note we do have Vizier of Menagerie in the sideboard because it gives us access to the top of our deck and we can reload and rebuild there. So that's the idea with that if we're going up against that in best of 3. Another call out that I want to make, in the 2-drop slot, we have a couple of other bangers that I think people are forgetting about or generally sleeping on, and I want to make sure that we don't. Yavimaya Iconoclast. This card is not overly impressive, and you may note it has a red kicker. It is a trampling creature, so it gives us a trample body, and it's a 3/2 elf for 2. That alone is worth the price of admission. Honestly, having a trampler that once any lords show up or the Banner of Kinship shows up, all of a sudden becomes very difficult to block. It's a pretty significant powerhouse. And if we have to keep it back to block other aggressive threats in the early game, it's often going to be able to actually trade with them instead of just chumping them. So yeah, Yavimaya Iconoclast, the stats are just right, frankly. And if you do have a Cavern of Souls down, Cavern of Souls can tap for red mana that can be used to satisfy that kicker, and so it could theoretically even have haste, which, if it were late in the game and maybe the Banner of Kinship is already down, or whatever the case may be, that could be a big deal. So it can squeak in for that last bit of damage that maybe the opponent doesn't see. If they do tap out on turn 5 for a Sunfall, if we're able to follow it up with the Iconoclast, assuming that we've done a decent chunk of damage before, this can still finish the game out for us. So I think it's fun. Also, Wildborn Preserver. This card has always been underrated because it was originally printed in Throne of Eldraine and got overshadowed by Fires of Invention and Oko. Understandably so. But it is a flash reach elf, and it's 2/2 for 2, and any additional mana that we have later in the game, we can drop into this in order to flesh it out and add stats to the board. Honestly, the other thing that in Standard right now, a lot of people are playing like tempo decks where they're relying on flyers to attack in to get, card draw and damage. And so being able to flash in a reach blocker can actually be really impactful. And on top of that, it's a 2/2 that the opponent doesn't plan for because it's showing up at their end step. So in general, I really like the Wildborn Preserver. I think the card is actually just quietly very good, and it lines up really nicely with some of the stuff going on the Standard ladder right now. So I like it. I think it is underrated. So keep an eye on this thing. Yeah. So let's go ahead and rock this out. Let's jump into some best of 1 gameplay just to get a couple of gameplay shots in. Because I am actually in a different location, longtime viewers may note that this background is not my normal background. This is a real background. This is not a green screen. And so as a result, I'm taking up a lot more real estate than I normally do on this channel. So during the gameplay, I'm planning on going camera off, and you're just going to get audio. That way I'm not covering up anything. So yeah, thank you for checking this out. I appreciate it. Let's get into some gameplay. All right, Elf Ball, game 1. Let's do this thing. So we have the Llanowar Stalker into the Leafcrown Visionary. So that seems pretty good. Also having the Cavern of Souls guarantees that once we get to 3 mana, the Iconoclast can be kicked. Now we don't have a turn 1 mana elf, which is a little unfortunate, nor do we have any kind of guarantee on the 3rd land drop. We are rocking only 20 lands because flooding out is usually a death knell for this kind of deck. So we'll see how that works. All right, Case of the Uneaten Feast from the opponent here is pretty decent, I would say. Let's go ahead and fire the Leafcrown Visionary here. That way the Llanowar Stalker is going to get the buff on itself as well as from the Lord. So that's decent. Fingers crossed for a land off the top. Another Case of the Uneaten Feast. Okay, they're going to be gaining life when things enter the battlefield. Just, are they going to Have any creatures in her? Well, there's one. Snarling Gorehound. Yep. Oakley dokley. Ooh, I really like having Tyvar. Yeah, I really like having access to Tyvar, but at this point, it's a little awkward because we just don't have that much in the way of mana. Missing our third land drop is a little bit of a bummer, so I'm just going to keep applying pressure. And these Iconoclasts being 4/3s, I mean, that's pretty nasty. Amalia, Benavides Aguera with 2 Case and Eat and Feast down, so just exploratory nonsense all day. Deep Cavern Bat, oh, how I loathe you, let me count the ways. All right, and they're going to keep, yeah, they're going to keep going. And the Surveil off the Gorehound, they had access to the plains, which is going to go away. Runelooker Bat enters. Amalia is going to be just too much to punch through. There is no way in any number... Well, here's the thing. Normally, I would say that there is a 0% chance we will ever punch through this Amalia just because of how ridiculously huge she's gotten. But if our deck lines up perfectly, and frankly, this is a good step in the right direction, if our deck lines up perfectly, we actually might. We might actually be able to outpunch this, which is kind of nuts. All right. So here comes the Elvish Archdruid, which unfortunately, even our 5/4 Iconoclast cannot punch through Amalia here. So I'm just going to go ahead and just let it be. Just going to pass that turn. Because next turn, we're going to be able to drop Tyvar and then tap the Elvish Archdruid. Oh, but they're just going to raise the pest and ruin my whole day. All right. Yep. I got to say, our opponent doing... using Amalia and the Snarling Gorehound to fill their graveyard into a Raise the Past, that actually lined up really nicely. Although, here's the thing. They're going to be gaining so much life here. You know, and they do have the Starscape Cleric, so they're going to ping me down here, to be fair. So the real question is, what's going to happen first? Is Amalia going to get to 20 counters, or am I going to die? That's really the question. Because once Amalia gets to 20 counters, the entire board gets wiped. Except for Amalia herself. So if that happens, although at this point, actually there might be enough triggers on the stack where it doesn't matter. I'm just dead anyway. Yeah, Starscape Cleric is kind of ruining my whole day here. All right. Oh, just kidding. Now we're into the Surveils. Okay. That's so many Surveils. I do like what our opponent's doing. That is a cool deck. Definitely an interesting design. And the fact that the Deep Cavern Bat just being the absolute dreaded nuisance that it is and stealing my Tyvar, like, that was my out. They stole my only out. Oh, baby, baby! They got there. 20 counters on Amalia. Boom, baby. Now I'm at... So I'm at 3, and they have a Raise the Pest on top. We're dead next turn. There is a 100% chance of that. So I'm just gonna kick this, and from the depths of hell I stab at thee. Yeah, this is gonna accomplish a big fat load of nothing. But I want to do it because I think it's funny. Yeah, so our opponent set up a really cool engine and absolutely obliterated us here. Yeah, good game, opponent. Blaze 911. Well done. Here it comes. Brace thyself. Yep. The fact that they found all 4 Gorehounds in the top 20 cards, that's pretty great. The Gorehound and Amalia were both just able to... Yeah, able to set everything up. The reason I didn't bother attacking there, like, obviously Amalia could have just turned sideways here, but they came here to do a thing. They wanted to show off. I get it. We got a good 1-drop. We got a bunch of good 2-drops. We're on the play. Let's frickin' ball. Leading off with the Llanowar Stalker. Cool, 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 cool. It's not as good as the Llanowar Elf, of course, but I'll work with what I got. Got a Lush Portico from the opponent. We are probably going to be staring down a Dwynen's lead off the top, which is pretty great. I'm guessing it is not going to be long before we see a Sunfall here. Just an assumption. But Dwynen's lead on 2 after the Stalker on 1 is pretty slick. Now, if we can find a Cavern of Souls here as our next draw, there are 4 in the deck. Chance of finding it, obviously not amazing. But if we do, I want to be stoked because that means the Elvish Archdruid can come down, buff the entire squad. Yeah, there's up the Beanstalk. And Cavern of Souls naming Horror. I expect to see Angel on that whenever my opponent is playing any kind of variant of the Domain deck, which is what I'm assuming we're looking at here. So Horror is interesting. What is that for? It's also not Avatar, which is the other one, because all the Overlords are avatars. All right. Grab an island. Hey, there we go. That is the land I was looking for. So here comes the Archdruid. Buff the squad. Punch enough. There we go. Turn 4. Boom. Nailed it. All right. Llanowar Stalker on 1 into Leafcrown Visionary on 2 seems decent. We're also sitting on a lot of 3-drops, so here's hoping our third land isn't too far away. Also, having the Cavern of Souls as one of our lands is pretty great, because as you can see, nearly every card in this entire deck is an elf creature, so it's as good as an untapped forest in this case, but it also just gives us, you know, that extra benefit. So I'm just going to run it out here. I mean, we're seeing Boros so far over there. Probably not anything that can really counter, per se, but all the same, let's rock it out. So the Llanowar Stalker now a 3/2 on turn 2. If they kill it, obviously that sucks. If they kill the Leafcrown Visionary, then that would also, reduce it down to a 1/1 because it is getting a buff from the Visionary. Manifold Mouse. Okay, it's the darn mouse deck. I know this deck all too well. The fact that they didn't have a Heartfire hero on 1 is nothing short of miraculous, frankly. I am very stoked about that. All right. So, here comes the Elvish Archdruid. I don't have the mana to draw another card here. However, even the Leafcrown Visionary is big enough to favorably attack here. So, that Manifold Mouse is going to be a double striker on the, coming in, at the very least. And I'm probably not going to block it. You know, there's a really good chance that they've got a Monstrous Rage in hand. I'm just going to assume that's the case. So the Emberheart Challenger is going to be double striking. Yep. Come on in, buddy. Yeah, the fact that they actually attacked with the Manifold Mouse tells me they have... Well, they have a Monstrous Rage, but they're using it right now? Alright, I'm going to take the 12 damage, but I'm going to kill your Manifold Mouse. Like, you're hitting me for a lot, but you could have waited. Yeah, that's a tough break. All right, I kind of love having 3 lands in the opener. Yeah, and the Citanul Stalwart into Dwynen's Elite is a perfectly fine 1/2. So if the Stalwart survives, we're going Dwynen's Elite and just establishing an elf board. If not, and, if the Citanul Stalwart gets blasted, although Simic, that's probably not going to happen. Okay, what do we got? Yavimaya Coast. Okay. Into a Bushwhack. All right, groovy. So yeah, Dwynen's Elite is definitely coming on down here. All right, we have more lands, which hopefully it'd be nice if that pattern doesn't necessarily continue. But they're nice to have, I guess. All right, up the Beanstalk. All right, we all know this card. It's truly insane. Yeah, more lands. I did say that I like them. I asked for this in a way. All right. We're going to go ahead and kick it. So the Iconoclast is coming on in with Haste and Trample. We're going to poppity pops. And then I'm holding back the Wildborn Preserver. They're on the Simic plan. There's a good chance this is the Eddie Murkcrab deck. Which, by the way, I loved him in the Nutty Professor. It was excellent. The Simic Terror is is definitely a deck that's been running around, doing the thing. All right, here comes the Dwynen's Elite. Let's just put more bodies on board. Because if it is, in fact, one of those Simic Terror decks, they have a lot of ways to bounce material off the board and buy time into a late game where they just have a number of huge monsters on board. If that's what we're dealing with, then I just need to punch through as much damage as I can and not stress a board wipe. They might be running Aetherize now, which is a new card. Well, it's a new old card from, that they added with Foundations. So I might have to play around that a little bit later, but in general, I'm not worried about, this board getting swept. They probably have Into the Flood Maw, maybe even Unsummon if they're feeling nasty. Yep, Unsummon. Dude, I love me some Unsummon. That card is so good. And this does prevent, it does prevent 3 damage, so fair enough. And we're holding back the Wildborn Preserver. I do not have a Cavern of Souls here, so there's a non-zero chance. Ooh, wait, Seed of Hope, well, okay, maybe not. Maybe this is one of those Valley Floodcaller decks. And the Seed of Hope did not find a land. That's brutal. Oh, no, Tellurian Terror. There it is. Okay. Okay. So, no, they are on Terror after all. Groovy. Okay. Then on the end step, I'm going to flash in this Preserver. They only have 1 mana back, so I'm assuming it's going to resolve. Oh, I'm smiling and mugging to the camera. Y'all can't see me right now. Sorry, that's what I'm used to. You know, between this and twitch.tv/hammox42. I'm mugging to the camera all the time. Oh, baby, baby. Hit me one more time. All right. Gonna throw the Elvish Archdruid. And I'm actually not gonna pump any mana into this Preserver here, because instead I'm gonna go ahead and tap the Elvish Archdruid to kick in the Iconoclast, and that was all of my mana. And then we full send, call it a day. Good game, opponent. So finally, in conclusion, are elves decent? Well, actually, I think they're okay. So throughout this past video, I did record a number of games, and I did select only some to show you guys. But in general, the only deck that we were consistently losing to was mono red, aside from the that Orzhov deck that you guys saw, which honestly, that was just slick. I couldn't help but show you guys that brew. Yeah, that opponent did a really cool job. But in general, it plays pretty well. It's able to actually put up a pretty decent fight, and I was impressed at how much damage we were able to generate in those early turns. So hey, if you enjoy elves, if you've been debating on whether or not to try standard, now's maybe not a bad time. And this particular elf deck is definitely fun, even if it's not absolutely amazing just yet. But if you want to just climb the ladder, turn some elves sideways, that's an option, and that's pretty cool. So, you know, whether or not the elf deck is good, well, that's still up for debate. We can still discuss that until the cows come home. But you know what is good? Our patrons. Thank you, patrons, for making it possible and for supporting this channel. It makes a huge difference. And you, dear viewer, you made it to the end of the video, so you must not hate what I'm doing, which I appreciate. You can help for as little as $1 a month to join on Patreon and have your name join all these folks at the end of my videos. And yeah, thank you, everybody. And yeah, patrons, Angry Jellyfish, Davey, Hal, Carl, Levi Grattan, Netsash, Big Mamu, and Vance. Thank you for your generosity. It makes a huge difference. I know a lot of you guys have been around for a long time, and seriously, thank you. I'm definitely focused more on doing the deck techs here on YouTube, and between this and my Twitch channel, I'm doing a lot these days, and I want to make sure that I'm focusing on the right places that you guys want to see. Dropping $1 in over at Patreon is a great way to show me that the YouTube deck techs are something that you do want to see moving forward. So, thank you. I appreciate you, and I'll catch you on the next one.